When we think about bringing a video game like Fallout to life, it's normal to think about CGI monsters and epic Wasteland vistas. But the truth is, the foundation of the show's authenticity came from really old-school, hands-on craftsmanship. Take the Brotherhood of Steel power armor, for example. Howard Cummings, the show's production designer, openly admitted that creating real, wearable suits was a massive ask. And yet, that's exactly what they did. These weren't just shell props sitting on a mannequin. These suits had to be functional, mobile, and believable for actors moving through a post-apocalyptic landscape. The team worked with a high-end effects studio, the same kind of outfit that might build Iron Man suits for Marvel movies, to construct hero versions for close-ups, stunt versions for action sequences, and even dummy suits for destruction shots. Every joint, every plate, every weld was designed to capture the game's iconic silhouette without sacrificing practicality. This hands-on approach extended far beyond the power armor. Props in Fallout were meticulously scavenged, built, and weathered. The show leaned heavily on real-world junkyards, flea markets, and estate sales to find period-correct artifacts that could be repurposed into the Wasteland's salvage-strewn streets. Old kitchen strainers became helmets, bent metal trays transformed into armor plates, and vintage 40s and 50s cars were ripped apart and welded into makeshift barricades. The aim was simple. Everything you see on screen should feel like it exists in the world, like people in a nuclear wasteland actually salvaged it themselves. Even the iconic Pip-Boy wrist devices were carefully scaled for practicality, with Ella Purnell's smaller wrist size factored into the design. Cummings explained that the challenge wasn't just replicating the look from the games, but making sure the items were wearable, functional, and could survive repeated takes on set. This kind of practical, tactile approach became a guiding principle for the entire production, grounding the world in something the camera could touch and audiences could believe in. Once the big mechanical stuff was in place, the team had to tackle something even trickier, transforming human actors into the mutated, post-apocalyptic creatures the games are famous for. Walton Goggins' role as a ghoul exemplifies this challenge perfectly. On the show, his character isn't just a ghoul in the abstract sense, he's physically different, scarred, and horrifyingly realistic. Fans might assume this was done primarily with prosthetics, but Goggins revealed that much of the ghoul effect came from a clever combination of CGI and practical makeup. He wore some prosthetic elements, like partial masks and overlays, but the fully deformed, one-eyed look was mostly created in post-production. This hybrid approach allowed the production to keep actors comfortable and mobile while achieving a level of visual fidelity that wouldn't be possible with prosthetics alone. On the other hand, Ella Purnell faced a very different set of challenges. Her makeup routine was described as grueling, partly because the show's visual design demanded that characters look genuinely worn down by the harsh wasteland environment. Sweat, grime, and dirt weren't just applied once. They had to accumulate over scenes to reflect the characters' journeys realistically. Purnell talked about how her makeup process each day felt like a chore, not because of the artistry involved, but because of the physical endurance it required. Every smear, every streak of blood or soot had to be consistent across takes while still feeling natural. Together, the Goggins and Purnell examples highlight a core production philosophy. The human element in Fallout had to feel weathered. Even the most fantastical creatures or extreme environments were rooted in human performance and physical reality. The makeup and prosthetic teams worked in tandem with Cummings' production design to make sure actors could inhabit this world fully, whether that meant shuffling through the ruins as a heavily armored soldier or moving convincingly as a ghoul with partially deformed anatomy. With practical builds and human transformations covered, the show also leaned a lot on real-world locations to bring the wasteland to life. Unlike a fully green-screened environment, Fallout wanted the terrain to feel tangible. The production scouted deserts, abandoned industrial zones, and derelict urban spaces to replicate the feel of a post-nuclear America. For example, junkyards with rusted buses, vintage cars, and industrial debris were transformed into sprawling settlements that looked like they had grown organically from the ruins. Meanwhile, vault interiors and retro-futuristic sets were constructed to evoke the game's signature 1950s-inspired sci-fi aesthetic. Howard Cummings explained that the vaults were meant to feel clean at first, almost sterile, a striking contrast to the chaos outside. This mirrored the narrative arc. Vault dwellers begin in order and uniformity, but exposure to the wasteland would eventually introduce wear, grime, and decay. Production designers meticulously recreated the game's visual language in these interiors, paying close attention to color schemes, signage, and even the subtle quirks of mid-century design that the games had popularized. One very interesting detail is how the production treated scale. Props, sets, and architecture had to maintain the slightly exaggerated proportions of the games without feeling cartoonish. This applied to everything from the size of control panels and Pip-Boys to the bulkiness of the power armor and the towering mechanical doors of the vaults. It's this careful attention to proportion that helps the world read as both familiar to game fans and believable as a living, breathing environment. While practical builds and real-world locations formed the backbone of the show, visual effects were key to stitching it all together. Fallout uses a hybrid approach that combines practical effects with modern filmmaking technology. LED volumes, essentially massive curved screens that display digital environments in real time, were used for background shots, allowing actors to react to dynamic lighting and environments without relying solely on green screen compositing. This setup creates realistic reflections and consistent lighting that makes the Wasteland feel immediate and also immersive. The production also used 35mm film in conjunction with LED volumes, which might seem old school, but it allowed cinematographers to capture a depth and texture that digital alone often lacks. Practical effects like explosions, debris, and mechanical animatronics were carefully choreographed to interact with both actors and LED projections. Then, digital enhancements, from Ghoul's deformations to large-scale environmental touches, were layered on top. The result is a seamless visual style that keeps the audience grounded in a physical world while still achieving the epic, game-like scale that fans expect. This combination of practical effects, LED volume work, and high-end film stock underscores a broader production philosophy: balance. Nothing in Fallout is purely digital, but nothing is purely practical either. It's a careful dance between the tangible and the fantastical, where actors, props, and sets inform the digital augmentation rather than being replaced by it. This makes the Wasteland feel lived in, a place where dust, rust, and human labor matter as much as explosions or radiation effects. The final layer of authenticity comes from the costumes, props, and subtle nods to the games. Costume designer Amy Westcott had the monumental task of translating iconic looks into wearable, believable clothing. Vault suits, for example, had to look exactly like the game while being comfortable enough to move in, shoot action sequences, and last under extreme lighting conditions. Wasteland outfits blended punk, biker, and scavenger aesthetics to reflect the story's life after apocalypse vibe. Every rip, patch, and scrape was intentional, designed to tell the story of survival in a harsh, decayed world. Props were similarly faithful. Pip-Boys, guns, and even seemingly small environmental details like lunchboxes, signage, or background tech were designed with lore and fan service in mind. Howard Cummings and his team even went to lengths to maintain subtle references that hardcore fans would recognize: familiar symbols, faction insignias, and minor props lifted directly from the games. These Easter eggs provide layers for attentive viewers and reinforce the show's identity as an adaptation rather than a loose spin-off. Looking ahead to Season 2, these same methods are evolving as the show moves into the Mojave Wasteland and New Vegas. Expect the same obsessive attention to detail: practical builds for new locales, carefully constructed sets for urban decay and neon-drenched streets, wearable power armor and faction costumes, and hybrid VFX LED volume techniques to maintain visual consistency. New Vegas offers a larger playground for world building, with more faction dynamics, environmental storytelling, and iconic landmarks from the games. The production is doubling down on what worked in Season 1 while expanding the scope and scale, ensuring that each location, prop, and costume serves both narrative and fan expectations. The show's approach has set a new standard for video game adaptations. It's not enough to just replicate what players recognize. Fallout builds a world that feels real in every tactile detail, from rusted armor plates to grime-smeared faces, and then elevates it with technology that amplifies immersion rather than replacing it. Season 2 promises to take that philosophy even further, offering a more expansive Wasteland, new threats, and opportunities for the creative team to push their hybrid, practical, LED film methodology even further, all while keeping the quirky, grimly hopeful tone that makes Fallout so unique. Thanks for watching Collider. See you next time.